All right, let me try this again. So, pivoting from my last upload, I was going to do a whole bunch of stuff about how the zeroth dimension works and all that stuff. But I decided to do this upload real quick instead because I was a little bothered or anxious about previous uploads that I had put that have controversial information in there. But this is ultimately the thing, is that the movement has more to do with not allowing anyone to impose their will upon someone else than anything else. So I don't believe that it's the case that we should all force each other to do what the majority of us thinks is right. I think that everybody should be allowed to have their own area where they are surrounded by other people that agree with what they believe. And that people should just have their own areas like that instead of it being like everybody has to follow the exact same laws. Because that's the way it is right now. And there's a lot of discontent because people are fighting all the time about what laws should be and what laws should not be enacted. And that leads to a lot of tension because there's not really a way to relieve it. Because if you are in the mindset that you should impose your will upon everyone else around you to force them to believe the same things that you believe, it sounds bad, but people do it every day without realizing it. And they don't think it's bad when they do it. What will happen is they'll get confronted with something that they personally think is obviously wrong, like some parent that allows their kid to have sexual reassignment surgery when they're 8 years old. But to the parents that allow this to happen, the other parents are the ones that are at fault, the ones that don't let their kids get sexual reassignment surgery when they're 8 years old are seen as the ones that are at fault to those parents that do allow it. So they both see each other as wrong. And neither of them finds it obvious that, as to why the other one believes what they do. Neither one of them can explain why the other one holds that idea. But they both have their own mutually exclusive contradictory beliefs that can't both coincide in the same area, but yet they do both coincide in the same area legally. They're both part of the same country, but yet they have completely diametrically opposed views. So that's the problem, and it happens all over the place. A less controversial issue might be like pot. So a lot of states still don't allow it. A lot of states still don't allow you to buy and sell pot legally, marijuana, whatever. But some states do. And the federal government still says that marijuana should be illegal. It's still illegal federally, but there are some states that have legalized it. So, when if the federal government were to ever raid, let's say, a Colorado dispensary, which they could legally do at any time, if they ever did do that, I would consider that to be an imposition of will, because that's the Fed just randomly deciding to do that. Now, if the majority of the population in the nation all supported that raid on Colorado, I would still personally consider that an imposition of will, but at least legally it would make sense and still be considered integrated. I wouldn't support it, but it would still be valid. Now, the issue that happens in America is no one feels represented by the government that supposedly represents them. And no one feels like they're empowered to actually have a direct impact on the way that the government functions for the most part. We have little bits here and there, like, we can do ballots and we can have signed petitions and we can, hold meetings and things like that. And that's true. But for the most part, we don't have direct impact on, for example, where our taxes go. That just ends up getting decided by the government. We don't get a direct impact on how much healthcare we have or what kind. We don't have a direct impact on our education. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that we don't have any real impact upon. So the way that the United States functions currently, it does impose its will upon its population. In fact, all governments currently on Earth all impose their will upon their population in some way. They don't allow people to form into integrated areas that all hold the same belief structures. And so what you end up with is parallel societies where they'll reside geographically inside of the nation, but their laws that they internally keep with each other are completely different. And so geographically, they might be inside the nation, but they don't represent the nation, and the nation doesn't represent them. And they're basically invading. So the integrity of the nation is at stake when the population doesn't feel represented, or actually, it isn't a feeling, when the population is not represented by their government. And the only way that the government can represent the population is if everybody got to vote like they used to in Athens, where everybody just votes on everything, and it's a direct democracy where it's one vote per person, and everybody gets the chance to vote if they're a citizen, and everything is on the ballot for all to vote upon. That, or everybody agrees that they're all going to be part of a constitutional nation that all shares one set of unchangeable laws, so that you don't even have voting, you just have acquiescence to the set of laws that already exist, and you continue on just abiding by those, provided, of course, that you can always legally leave. And then the last way I can think of that the government could reform so that it wouldn't impose its will upon the masses and it would represent the masses or be represented by them is if it had a republic where everybody had equal access to being in power or being in a hierarchy of power. And the way that you ascend into that hierarchy of power is simply by passing a fair qualification test that tests the most common task that rank or hierarchical degree or office requires, and the most causally relevant tasks that are required, the ones that have the most causal impact, that are more integrated, more causally impactful. They impact a number of different things in the community. Those things need to be tested for any qualified candidate to get that position. And they should not be voted in that system. They should just qualify through a merit-based qualification test. So those are the three systems that could be used that would allow for a government to operate and still represent its population without imposing its will upon it. And the easiest way of determining whether a government is imposing its will upon its population or representing its population is based upon the detriment to the population by its own government, in terms of not offering its citizens the best opportunities that the citizens themselves would have chosen. So, for example, if the government makes a bunch of deals with a bunch of companies such that only a handful of companies control the entire food market, for example, and then choose to skyrocket the cost of all food, that would be something that would be imposing its will upon the population because it's a necessary detriment to their survival. So it has to be something that's objectively measurable. So it has to be a survival need, a necessity of the population that the government has artificially taken away from its population. That isn't just a natural consequence of something that the population themselves enacted, but that the government artificially enacted without any consent from its populace. And to the degree to which it actually starts necessitating a removal of survivability from its population, so that its population is less able to survive with it than it would be without it. So you could try that also. And a lot of people would say the United States doesn't fall into that category, but the problem is that the United States allows for GMOs for example, like companies like Monsanto to operate. And Monsanto does a whole bunch of shady stuff, like patent certain genetic forms of agriculture. And if a single seed gets into another farm, they can take the entire farm. Stuff like that. And some, I've heard stories that some Monsanto employees will even take seeds and toss them over a fence to deliberately infect their neighbors' farms. And that way they can, come down on them later on and say, well, you stole our genetic, plant, which is our trademark product. And so now we can shut your business down and blah, blah, blah. There's stuff like that goes on. The FDA is totally in collusion with the federal government. There's all kinds of stuff. And you could say, oh, well, we just need yet another oversight committee. But there's already so many oversight committees, it doesn't seem to matter in the long run. They just end up finding a way around them, or they end up buying them out. Mostly the issue that I see in America about people imposing their will upon other people is that the hiring practices, I absolutely cannot stand the hiring practices here, because the way that you end up getting a job is that you have to sell yourself in some weird ass cultural way to your boss. Now, I understand that you have to get along with the other people that you're going to work with, but I don't see how that initial meeting with your boss or hiring manager actually accurately represents you as a person. There's not really enough time, and there's not really enough of a way of telling who that person is to do that. So I think that anybody who is qualified should be hired on a first come, first served basis. Whoever put their qualification through the fastest should get the job. I don't see any reason why it should have anything to do with this weird, arbitrary, and completely indefinable, ineffable interview is what they call it. I can't stand being interviewed. It's so fake. Why did you ask to be a part of our company? Because I want a fucking paycheck. That's obviously why I'm applying. It's because I'm qualified and I want a fucking paycheck. Nobody goes to a company and goes, oh, I love your company and what it stands for. Nobody cares what your company stands for, because your company doesn't stand for shit except getting rich, like every other company on earth, and everyone knows that. No one goes to a company and goes, yay, I like your company mission. Yay, I like what you stand for. Unless you actually stand for something, like on purpose, like that's part of what makes your company distinct. If it isn't, if your company is just a Kirby vacuum salesman company, like every other company is, then no, I don't care about your mission statement, because you're just out selling spaghetti noodles. I don't care what you're doing. You're selling, finger painting. I don't care. It doesn't serve a direct impact on someone's culture. And if you do engage in it, then it's just virtue signaling so you can get more money. So there is no company that does this unless it's a not-for-profit charity. If I go to a charity organization, that's when it makes sense to ask, why did you want to join? But then again, it's also self-evident, or at least I would think it would be. To the point of, if I did ask that question to somebody that was going to get hired on at a charity, I would consider the question to be redundant, because the company stands for whatever it is the person's trying to get hired for. So the question itself is just irrelevant and stupid. But every single person asks it during the interview process, even though it's completely irrelevant and it doesn't matter what I say and it doesn't really mean anything, and it forces me to pretend that something is the case when it isn't. I can't stand that. I really liked the way that Amazon did it. Amazon hired you, just like I had said. If you get your application in before a particular deadline, you'll automatically get into an interview, and then, or not an interview, but a hiring process. And then they will hire you as long as you're qualified and you pass your drug test, then you're hired. And that's the way it should be. And then if you don't work out, then they just, terminate you, and they've got plenty of other people to take your place. And it's fine. That's the way it should be. That's how it should work, ideally. But most of the time, it just doesn't. And there are no places on Earth that you can go to where you can work for a machine and get paid exactly the same every single time you complete a task. Your tasks are going to vary from day to day, and your tasks, as far as the value of those tasks, is going to be arbitrarily measured by your boss to a totally unpredictable subjective measure that everyone finds infuriating. There are no operationally defined procedures at your job. There's no SOP unless you're in the military, and even then, in a lot of cases, there aren't any SOPs that apply to whatever it is that you're doing. You just have to wing it on the spot, but you're liable for the consequences if you fuck it up. So all of this stuff is to say that the political, economic, and cultural milieu of the United States at present is deplorable, and I can't stand it. So I'm trying to create a new movement. I will tolerate it. I can't get rid of it. I can't obliterate it. I shouldn't even attack it. Although, honestly, in my heart, I do. I hate it. But if I'm going to really, truly be a good representative of this movement, I shouldn't. I shouldn't hate it. I should recognize that it has its own validity as well. I just don't see it because I'm not that kind of person. But yeah, so that's the best that we can do as humans. We're going to take slights at things. We're going to dislike things. We're going to hate things, even. But we have to tolerate them. And we have to, if we do attack it, we have to take a step back. Well, I messed up. I had no justification for attacking anyone. I can only defend my own position. And I think that that's also, one of the tenets of this movement is you don't ever attack, you always defend. You can always defend yourself, but you cannot attack anyone else. So regardless of what I say about trans people, black people, white people, rich, poor people, communists, capitalists, it doesn't even matter. Those specific, generic issues that everybody thinks matter are irrelevant. They don't matter. The only thing that matters is somebody's will being imposed upon someone else, or are people tolerating each other's disagreements such that no one's forcing anyone to do anything. Now, of course, the only exception to that rule is if somebody commits a crime. And the crime is always the same. It's that they forced it on someone else first. So if someone takes away my freedom, then I have the right to take away their freedom. And that is true, because otherwise we all lose our freedom. So we have to take away the freedom of those who take freedom away from other people. But that doesn't mean that we escalate it beyond the freedoms that were taken. So if somebody beats somebody up, that's not the same thing as killing them. If they kill them, that takes all their freedom away because now they're not even alive. If I beat them up, that takes some of their freedom away because now they're not free to live in comfort and ease without pain. But they can still live. So they still have most of their options available. They can still go out to the movies. They can still go see their girlfriend on Tuesday night. They can still do whatever they're going to do because I didn't kill them, but they have to do all that in pain because I beat them up. So there has to be an equal restraint. Just like that guy that was running over everybody with his car, and the police officer comes out of his car, and the guy points his wallet at him and says, "I have a gun, shoot me, kill me." And the officer says, "No, I don't care," and grabs his baton and restrains him. Doesn't escalate beyond the threat of the present moment. So that is how it would function. So if somebody has a disagreement with somebody else, somebody claims that their kid deserves to have sexual reassignment surgery, and somebody else says, no, they don't, and then there's this argument about, well, is somebody imposing their will upon somebody else? And this is how it gets solved, is the people who think that the children should have their sexual reassignment surgery as a right, those people need to occupy one area over there, and the people who disagree with them need to occupy some other area over here, and they just don't mix with each other. And if they do mix with each other, they need to be separated from each other. Because, unfortunately, there's no way to rationally dismantle the other person's argument because both of those positions are equally valid. If the child says that that's what they want, then technically there's not really a way of discerning whether or not that's an imposition of will. Now, you could say, but it's a kid. But then again, the definition of the word kid or child is arbitrary. You could say, but it's anybody that's below the age of 18. But again, that's arbitrary. Why is it 18 and not 17 and a half? Why is it not 17 and a half instead of 16 or 15 or 14 or 13? Where is the age? And then you can say even that it shouldn't be an age, because there are some 10-year-olds that are more mature than 40-year-olds. There's 40-year-old virgins eating pizza bites that have never worked a day in their life and live off their mom's social security checks. Those people are not more mature than a 15-year-old that's raising their brothers and sisters because their crack addict mom is out on the street selling her puss and her dad is out in the fucking prison banging rocks into small rocks. And yet she's out there raising her brothers and sisters and making sure that they have a place to come home at night that's safe and nurturing. And she's doing that at 15 years old. And this fat ass is sitting in his lazy boy chair eating pizza bites at 40 years old and still hasn't lost his virginity and hasn't worked a day in his life and lives off his mom's social security check at 40. And you're going to tell me that 40-year-old is more mature than that 15-year-old? I'm going to tell you you're full of shit. And you can call me a pedophile if you want. I don't give a shit. And this is what I'm saying about this movement. It's like this single issue crap, this is where Charles shines, because that's what's going to get people in arguments so that they don't ever band together, so that they don't focus on the things that actually matter. And like I said, if you think that it matters, that's fine. You can, group together with other people who think that it matters. But you can't convince me that it matters, and you can't tell me that I'm wrong if I say it doesn't matter. You just have to band together with other people that agree with you, and I band together with people who agree with me. And that's it. And then we just let each other do whatever we're going to do over there. And that's the thing, is like, what's the conflict resolution? Separation. You just separate. You say, okay, if you disagree with me and we can't reach a conclusion, then we're going to have to separate, because we can't occupy the same location, obviously, because we can't stand each other's positions. But we also can't kill each other because we don't know which of us is actually right. So the best thing that we could do is compromise, and I'll let you live, but I don't want you anywhere near me. And that's kind of where we end up at that point. Now, like I said, with all of the single issues, trans rights, blah, 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 abortion, blah, 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 all that stuff is the same to me. If you take one of those positions versus the other, it doesn't matter to me. That's not a political system. That's just a position. If you take that position, that's fine. You just group together with other people who share that position with you. But you don't go out of your way to try to go attack other people that don't. You don't attack other people who disagree with you. You just let them do whatever they're going to do. You can always find more of your own. You can always recruit more people. You can even try to persuade and convert other people if you want to. But if they are not having it, if they don't want to listen to you, if they don't want anything to do with your shit, then you just have to let them go and do whatever they're going to do. You don't touch them. And if they touch you, then you have to restrain them. You don't kill them, you just restrain them. And then you get them away from you. But, that's how that gets dealt with. So in a verbal argument, that's fine. You can just debate it out. If that escalates into violence, then you're going to have to restrain someone and immobilize them. Don't kill them, but immobilize them so that they can't move and run around and cause a whole bunch of rioting and all that stuff. You contain it right then and there, and you restrain them, and then you make sure that they're calm, and then you release them over there, away from everyone else. And that's the only way that you can really handle that kind of a thing. So that's part of the movement too, is like, if you disagree with somebody, that's the route that you take, is that you try to persuade them through verbal debate. If they don't want to listen to that, then they just separate from you. If they escalate, then they have to get restrained and then physically separated. But in either case, if they can't be converted, they have to be separated. Those are the only two methods of conflict resolution. Either one of them absorbs the other one, or they both leave each other alone. Because, like I said, these positions, you can't argue that one of them is correct and the other one isn't. Because it's up to whoever it is that wants to look at it that way. And I think that's the main thing that this movement has that no other movement that I've seen has, is you just have to, there is no right answer for everyone. There are people out there who want to support their child's quote unquote right to have sexual reassignment surgery. And all I can do is personally oppose that by saying I disagree. but I have to tolerate it. And if there are people that agree with that and they end up joining the movement, I don't have any problem with that. I only have a problem with them if they start shit with somebody else. And that's basically, like I said, that's why I don't care. I don't care if somebody believes that, Black Lives Matter is the best thing since sliced bread. If you agree with that movement, that's fine. I personally don't. I don't want you near me. But if you wanted to try to politely persuade me that that's the route that I should be taking, or that your side is the correct side, or that your position is tenable, that's fine. You can always debate me. You can always politely say something. But that's also the reason that I don't find that position very tenable, because I don't see politeness and I don't see conversion. I see demands and I see threats coming from that movement, but I don't see very much in the way of building bridges. I see a whole bunch of walls and I see a whole bunch of violence, but I don't see any bridges being built. So then I say, that's fine. You can do that. Just don't do it anywhere near me. And like I said, if as an individual you end up taking someone else's rights away, if you take away their freedom to be a white supremacist, which I also, again, equal to me, doesn't matter to me either way. You could be a white supremacist, you could be a black supremacist, you could be a Jewish supremacist. I don't care, as long as you're not taking anyone else's rights away, as long as you're not taking anyone's freedom away. I don't care what you do. And as far as it being like, well, what about child versus adult? I don't make those distinctions, because those distinctions are arbitrary. It depends on who you ask. So I'm going to have my own definition of what it is to be a child. That, to me, is a child is someone who can't take care of themselves. As long as you can put a roof over your head, you're an adult to me. If you can go out and you can get a job and you can work and you can pay all your own bills and you can do it consistently for 3 months and you pay your bills, all of them, food, grocery, transportation, fees, parking fees, driver's license, all of the stuff that you need to be independent, and you do all of it, you're an adult. You can make all your own decisions. I can't even stop you because you're independent enough that I physically can't do shit about it. You're just free. You just go out and you do whatever you want. That's what it means to me. But there's other people out there that say that it's just anybody above the age of 18 is an adult. Not to me, but that's how some people draw that line. And which of us is the right one? Well, I don't know. I mean, that just depends on how you look at it. So I take my position and you take yours. And like I said, we can argue about it. If you want, we can debate. And maybe you could convince me why yours is better than mine, and that we should somehow come to a compromise where you have to be both 18 and capable of putting a roof over your head, and then you're a real adult. Maybe it needs to be combined. I don't know. And that's, for the debate. That's all for speculation. But the point is that no one is imposing their will on anyone else. If you use some other definition for what it is to be a child versus an adult, and you say it's just 18 period the end, and I say that it's if you can put a roof over your head the end, and you and I come to some kind of conflict there where, you got a problem with my kid because I consider him to be an adult, but you don't, and therefore you don't want him dealing with whatever, I don't know. You want to get on my ass for letting him smoke pot or something, I guess. Well, you gave your kid a fucking half a lid of Jamaican grass. It's like, fuck you, sue me. I don't care. I mean, he's paying his own way anyway, I don't care. And, you get on my ass and you're like, but he's not 21. Oh, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, if there's some kind of conflict like that and you want to protect my kid from me, then it's like, well, no, okay. Yeah, I didn't necessarily impose my will on him, and neither did you, and neither did anyone else. No one is necessarily imposing their will on someone else. That imposition of will is contingent upon your definition of what it is to be a child at that point. So if it's contingent like that, where it depends on how you look at it, I just let it up to debate. And if you can't solve it in a debate, then you just leave each other alone. And that's it. Now, if it's necessary, that's when the movement's rules come into play. No imposition of will upon someone else. So if you pull a fucking loaded gun out, even if it's not loaded, you pull a gun out on me, that's imposing your will on me necessarily. Now I have to pay attention to what you're saying because my life's on the fucking line, right? So that's a necessary imposition of will. You put a gun out on somebody and that's it. You've already imposed your will. I don't care what your definition of what a gun is. It doesn't matter. If you brandish some weapon like that, then it's an issue. And then of course, you could say, but how would you define brandishing a weapon? And it's like, well, if the primary purpose of the instrument that you're brandishing is lethal, then I consider that to be a weapon. If you pull out a spoon, I know that you could kill someone with a spoon, but the primary purpose of the spoon is to eat. So if you whipped that out, no, I wouldn't consider that to be brandishing a weapon, even though you could use a spoon as a weapon. Its primary purpose is to eat, not to be used as a weapon. So it's kind of like how the government schedules drugs. If there's a medicinal reason for it, then they say that it's not quite as bad as if it had no medical purpose. If it has no medical purpose, then it's a pure recreational drug, at which point it gets scheduled as such and, prohibited. So it's kind of the same way with me and weapons. If the purpose of the instrument is primarily something non-lethal, then no, I wouldn't consider that to be brandishing a weapon. But you could say, well, doesn't that depend on your definition of what it is to be a weapon? And then I would say, no, it doesn't. It's necessary that that's the definition of what it is to be a weapon. Because when we say brandishing a firearm or brandishing a weapon, everyone knows what that means. It means a lethal device. It means a device whose primary purpose is to be lethal. It's to kill stuff. It's a knife. It's a gun. It's something like that. And if somebody does pull out a knife on someone, everyone knows that's less deadly than pulling a gun out. By the time you pull a gun out, everybody's on your ass. You pull a knife out, okay, maybe some people will look the other way. But there's going to be a lot of people that don't, because again, if you're pulling a knife out and you're at a bar, you're not eating. Okay, you don't have a steak in front of you. Obviously, that's not the purpose of what the knife is at that point. If you don't have a steak in front of you, you shouldn't be pulling a knife out. You know what I mean? Like, if there's not a reason in the immediate area for you to have this instrument and you just pull it out, then obviously that's going to be an issue. I don't see there being much room for debate there. If someone died during the act, which is obviously an imposition of will, and they died because somebody gouged their eyes out with a spoon, then we would still consider the moment that they pulled the spoon out to be brandishing a weapon, because that's what they used it for. A classic example would be like, what is that fucking book? Raskolnikov, the character from Dostoevsky's book, Crime and Punishment. He picks up this axe. I love this part in this book. He picks up this axe and he says, I remember the point at which this axe became a murder weapon, when it became evidence of a crime. And it was still the same axe, but because of it being used to split this old lady's head open, it's now been transformed into a murder weapon. Where it was once just a common axe for chopping wood, it's now a piece of evidence in a crime. And yet it's the same object, but the purpose of it has changed. So, when we try to ascertain someone's purpose, yes, again, that's going to be subjective, but the effect that it has narrows that ambiguity to the point where most people don't have any more reason to doubt what the intent is at the consequence. So again, like I said, there really isn't much room for debate when we're talking about violence. If you give a kid a drug, it could be used the same way as if you were to point a gun at someone, because it can be lethal, especially to a kid. If you give someone a speedball, that's a hell of a lot different than just giving them a little bit of meth or a little bit of heroin. You mix them together, and that's something, again, lethal. So it does have gray areas like everything else does, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to follow. If somebody has a necessary reason to impose their will on you, like a police officer or a medical officer or something like that, where they have to impose their will in order to save someone's life in that acute, immediate moment, that's okay. But if it gets to be prolonged, like Caesar, where you just tyrannically take over the whole fucking scene and you never give up your control back, okay, that's an issue. And like I said, most people can follow that line of logic pretty easily. So the spirit of the movement is pretty simple. It's just individual freedom. And, the nitty gritty of it, I'm going to be working out as I go. I keep doing these uploads just to kind of like talk myself through it. I pretend that I'm talking to somebody else that gets me to get into this dialogue, and then I try to figure out how it is that I would put it to someone else. So it isn't formal yet. It hasn't fully crystallized yet into a real movement yet. So if you find these uploads, including all the previous ones, and probably in fact, if you find any uploads on this channel that have my legal name on it, Michael Trevathan, if you find any videos uploaded to that channel, don't take that as some kind of a official document. And I say this a lot in a lot of them just to make sure that people know that, yeah, it's not to be taken literally. It is not to be taken, nitpicky, meticulously pick it apart and all that stuff, because it's not done yet. It's still in the process of formalizing. There's a lot of generalities that I'm trying to cover. So the movement stands for individual freedom. As long as you're not taking someone else's freedom away from them, then I don't have any problem with whatever it is that you're doing. And if you start talking to me about children, like I say, the definition of children is contingent. It's an arbitrary definition. You cannot give me a true to life definition of what a child is versus what an adult is, because every single time that you draw that line, it's still going to include some people that you don't really want included, and it's going to exclude some people that you don't really want to exclude either, no matter what your definition is, whether it's 18 and that's it, whether it's putting a roof over your head and that's it, whether it's a combination of those two and that's it. Regardless of what it is, it's arbitrary. Whatever definition that you come up with, or whatever it is that you feel like is correct, that's going to be something that you can either debate with somebody else about, or you can stick to your own kind of person that agrees with you about what you consider to be a child and what you don't. Because the last thing that I would want is to be your neighbor if you and I disagree on what a child is, because that could lead to some really weird situations. There could be a lot of things that can happen there where it's not going to be a fun time between us. So, for example, if your 40-year-old virgin son decides to start getting sexual with my 15-year-old daughter, that's going to be an issue, because I'm not going to consider, the 40-year-old to be in the same mature bracket as somebody that has their own job and can take care of themselves and has all their own bills paid, regardless of what their age is. In which case, my daughter's the adult and your son is the child, and I don't want my daughter implicated and responsible for what your son's getting involved in, etc. And in your case, vice versa, or however that definition ends up going. But you don't want to be neighbors with somebody that disagrees with you about what the definition of a child is. That's some scary shit. That can lead to a lot of problems. So, since we can't ever figure out what, quote unquote, the definition of a child is, we can only group together in common assemblies of those who agree with us about what that definition should be. And there is no the right one, so we can't then tell our neighbors they have to agree with us, which is what everybody always tries to do. That's what the movement is against. We don't tell the neighbor, hey, switch your definition over to mine, or else we say, I wish you would change your definition and here's why. And then if they choose not to listen, we just have to let them not listen. There is no such thing as saying, no, you have to do what I say. There's no way to slice that pie, because no one knows which way to slice it. So we just have to group together based upon our common definitions. And when we don't, then we should try to tolerate each other if we can. If we can't, then we need to separate. And that's it. And it's common sense. It's like kindergarten rules.